Before we get started, we need to do a little bit of Zoom housekeeping. Please remember to chat to ask your questions, and we will capture them and be able to convey them to Tony later in the program. Please remember to keep yourself muted, and also please remember to update or correct your profile name so that we have a good record of everyone who's with us today. The year 2020 turned the world on its head in terms of health and its relationship to science, in terms of responsibility and our responsibility toward others, in terms of culture and how we view leadership, in terms of civility and how we view injustice. Most of us are still not sure which way is up, and many of us don't know what to do. We're not sure why life seems different, and sometimes we're not sure how we're going to recover. We're here today to hopefully give you some answers. You'll get to hear from Cary Morgridge as she shares the Future of Giving report that was commissioned by the Morgridge Family Foundation. Cary's going to lay a foundation for the rest of today in her welcome. She's going to talk about the intersectionality between donors and nonprofits and philanthropists. You'll also get to spend some time live with Tony Cohen. He's going to take the Future of Giving report and provide you with application and answers. And you'll get to have a discussion with him. We hope that you'll leave with tools. If you are a donor or a philanthropist, we hope that you leave with clear insights about how and when to get involved. If you're a nonprofit, we hope you'll leave understanding what motivates people to give. And everyone who's here with us today, we hope that you will leave transformed. So sit back, buckle up, hold on, and listen to our welcome from Cary Morgridge.
Hi, I'm Carrie Morgridge. I am the Chief Disruptor at Morgridge Family Foundation. One of the things that I'm most proud of being the Chief Disruptor is that I am a member of every single Impact100 chapter in the globe. And that brings a lot of hope, brings a lot of curiosity actually. And it helps me realize how many people are doing great things during this really hard time. And I have to say that COVID has struck us all, and all in different, hard, sometimes terrible times. I lost my stepmom to COVID late in the year, right before the holiday season. And I know that we all have a story to tell. But in those stories, we have to think about hope. And we have to be hopeful for the future. And here's why I'm hopeful for the future. We can't go back to the regular normal. And Impact100 would never allow us to do that. We need to have our sights set on the beautiful future ahead of us. But we must not forget our past. And a dear friend of mine has said, give away what you want to get back and give it freely. So if you want love, give love away. It will come back to you. If you want freedom, treat other people with freedom, respect, and dignity. Whatever you want out of your life, remember to give it freely first. It will come back to you. And I also want to talk about how hope gives us a lens of what can be. It lights our path and revives our spirits, even when the times are dark. So just remember, as we're starting this new year, how to be hopeful for the future, how to think about investing in your future in a new. Because we all have been impacted very, very seriously with COVID. And we're really looking forward when we can all hug and love on each other again. A few weeks ago, John and I moved into our new home in Montana. And I don't know why, but I came home broken. And I came home filled with self-doubt. I came home like almost not knowing who I was. And I don't know what triggered it, but I think it was the culmination of everything between COVID and friendship and love and the passing of my, father's wife. There was just so much emotion that just became so raw and so real. And I almost struggled a little bit on a depressive, like board for a while. And then the love of my husband and the love of my friends and the love of my staff really made me hopeful again and reminded me of who I was and who I could be. And so I just want everybody to know that COVID affects all of us, and you have to keep going because people are depending on you and people rely on you, and people are depending on all of us women at Impact 100 to make a difference in our community, and we're not going to let them down.
She's called the Chief Disruptor of the Morgridge Family Foundation, and she's a competitor in 9 Ironman triathlons. Cary Morgridge is now going to share the 5 cultural shifts changing the way we think about giving. And after Cary, we get to have a live conversation with Tony. So stay tuned. Thank you again, Cary. We're all really, really proud that she is a member of every Impact 100 chapter, including ours. She's transformational. Now, while Cary disrupts, Tony strategizes that disruption at the Morgridge Family Foundation, in between checking out museums and collecting art, of course. Tony takes the 5 Future of Giving concepts, and he's going to tell us how to apply them. Remember, if you have questions for Tony during his presentation, just send those to us in a chat, and we'll get to them at the end. Tony, they're all yours.
Thank you so much, Joyce, and it's such a pleasure to be here and to be speaking on behalf of the Northwest Florida Impact 100 chapter. I'm a huge fan. I might not be able to participate domestically in the United States, but I'm a huge cheerleader for Impact 100. I was sharing with some of your colleagues earlier that I was able to travel with Wendy Steele, the founder of Impact 100, to Australia and New Zealand last year to help her strategize the global growth of the organization. And just congratulations to all of the incredible work that you do in your community every single day. I'm honored to, I always tell Cary that if she wants me to speak, it's okay, but let me go first so that I don't have to follow her, which is unfortunately the case today. What Cary outlined was the Future of Giving report, which was, as you mentioned, commissioned by Sparks and Honey. The report was also helmed by Meredith Dreeman, who I want to give a shout out to from the Morgridge Family Foundation publishing team. Today, what I would love to do is, now that you have a fundamental understanding of the 5 cultural shifts in giving, I'm going to talk about what we actually did with that at the foundation, how Cary charged me to integrate those 5 cultural shifts into a big new program and what that looked like and what the results were. Just a little bit more about me. As Joyce mentioned, I'm the Director of Strategy at the Morgridge Family Foundation. So that means I get to do 2 things. One is I help identify, manage, and measure big partnerships with different nonprofits, typically over $250,000. And then the other thing I get to do is work alongside Cary and John Morgridge, as well as our entire incredible team at the Morgridge Family Foundation, to ask where we've been, where we're going, and how we can get there as a foundation. And what I'm about to share with you is a pretty exciting example of that. About a year ago, Cary came up to me and said, you know, we have a problem. And the problem is that our nonprofits that we work with every day have a demand for human capital. They need more human resources, and we don't see it as a sustainable giving model. We know that if we give $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 for a program coordinator or whatever the role may be at the nonprofit, how are we going to be able to sustain that over time? we know that salaries are typically not self-renewing. They're going to come back every year asking for the same gift, unless, of course, you endow a position, which can be a little bit expensive and cost many millions of dollars. So what we ended up over a period of time developing, and I'll tell you about the program first, and then how it directly relates and was reactive and proactive to the 5 cultural shifts from the future of giving. It's called the Morgridge Acceleration Program. And we just culminated our first cohort of fellows. Forbes actually did a pretty remarkable write-up on it and called it one of the most innovative fellowship programs of the year. What we did is we went to our nonprofit partners in our network and we said, if you had 26 hours in the day, what would you think about? What's that thing that you really wanted to have some extra human capital, extra human thought to think about? And they told us. And we went to a variety of partners in a variety of industries, all nonprofits. And then we said, what if we could find you a young person, someone roughly between the age of 25 and 35, someone who had demonstrated a remarkable imagination, integrity, initiative early in their career, and they could partner with you to think big and innovative and bring a fresh perspective into your organization. And that's really where the MAP Fellowship was born. These fellows, these young people who became charged to innovate some of our nonprofits, they were not full-time employees in the fellowship. They had real-time jobs. This was just a complementary professional development opportunity where they were able to partner with an executive and gain executive level problem solving experience today, all while the nonprofit executives were gaining a fresh perspective and real sustainable solutions to problems that they faced. So why am I telling you about the Morgridge Acceleration Program? It's because it was born and influenced and reactive to the 5 cultural shifts. And I'd love to walk you through that now. So just as a quick overview, as Carrie mentioned, the 5 cultural shifts are existential risk, youth rising, diminishing societal trust, brand as a benefactor, and precision funding. And Carrie mentioned this, but they really are an ecosystem. For example, you can't really talk about precision funding without talking about diminishing societal trust. Youth rising and brand as benefactor have direct connective tissue. So as I walk through these five pillars and how they were influenced into the Morgridge Acceleration Program Fellowship, know that if it sounds like, oh, there's a little, like that sounds kind of similar, that's a good thing, right? It's an ecosystem. It's meant to feed itself. It's meant to be connected. So existential risk. When we were building this fellowship, we know that collective survival, as Carrie mentioned, this idea that there are big problems that are facing all of humanity, macro and micro, that existed in the fellowship too. Well, each of our fellows were partnering with a nonprofit to work on very different challenges, be it fundraising or community engagement, whatever that might be. They were all put in this position where they were forced to be leaders very early in their career and work with nonprofit executives. We knew to successfully mitigate existential risk, we had to create a tribe. We had to build trust among the cohort that was founded in resilience and trust. And we did that in a few ways. One was we brought the fellows together every month for something called a mind meld. And the idea was that they could come together and talk, yes, about here's what I'm struggling with, and does anyone have a solution? Again, all of the fellows had different expertise. The beauty was not when a fellow would say, oh, you know, I'm trying to figure out this new social media strategy, and another would say, oh, I have that skill set, here's what you should do. The better aha moment was when a fellow said, I'm really struggling with this, and another fellow said, you know what, I'm struggling with that too. What that did was it created a vulnerability and a trust among the fellows that said, you know what, we are in this together and we are collective. The other thing that we did was we knew we had to build resilience and a feeling of resilience into this ecosystem. So we were really pretty aggressive about it. We partnered with an organization called the Aspen Institute out of Washington, D.C., and we brought them to our kickoff, and we had a roundtable where we had our cohort talk about some of the social injustice that was happening at the time in way of racial inequity, in way of COVID that was compounding some of these issues. And we had them have these tough conversations because we knew by integrating resilience in these tough conversations that it would build a trust and a bond that would help mitigate these existential risks within the cohort. Number 2, youth rising. This is obvious. We made a big bet. We said that young people are the future, right? They are going to be more philanthropically, more socially fully charged to make change in their communities. And Carrie was really excited about this idea of bringing in young people with big ideas to innovate stagnant systems within nonprofit organizations. And interestingly, what we found was the young people became the mentors to these nonprofit executives and guiding them to actually solve these challenges. It was pretty remarkable to see. Diminishing societal trust. We know that we're lacking trust. As Carrie mentioned, religion is declining. We look at fake news. We look at the government. So when I was looking at the Morgridge Acceleration Program Fellowship, I said, how could we be radically transparent? How could we come together and share what we were learning, and then build a foundation of trust among that? I already talked about these monthly meetings we had with the fellows that really enabled that. Another thing that we did, that was an internal way, I also said externally, we want to open source as much as we can of what we're doing. We want others to learn from it, and we want to be totally transparent with what we're doing. Each fellow built a case study that answered 3 questions about their time with the 6-month program. What was the problem that they were charged to solve? How did they go about solving it? And were they successful or not? And what I said to the fellows were, the best gift that you can give is honesty. Don't feel like you need to say, we killed it. We were super successful. If you struggled with something, talk about that. If something was a challenge for you, talk about how you overcame it or how you didn't. We want to open source this and set a new precedent for the industry that you're in or the problem that you're trying to solve. And we need to be honest and transparent with how we're doing that. We also invited our wider community, about 96 people, to come. This was supposed to be in person, but because of COVID, we pivoted to be virtual, and each fellow talked about their experience. And the reactions to their vulnerabilities were pretty amazing. Another foundation stepped up and said, I want to fund that fellow to continue doing this work. Another nonprofit said, I want that fellow to be on my board. Another organization actually said, I want to hire that fellow. It was pretty remarkable to see what happens when you can acknowledge that there is diminishing societal trust, but then find ways to infuse transparency into programs and organizations in meaningful and authentic ways. Brand is a benefactor. All of our fellows didn't come from the nonprofit sector. Some of them came from the private sector. And I knew that paramount to the success of this program was because it wasn't full-time, because we had, the fellows would have a full-time position, and then this would be like a 10-hour-a-month commitment for them. How was I going to sell this to employers? The answer is right there in brand as a benefactor. Young people feel that they want to be at the workplace more socially involved. They want to feel like they have a social impact footprint. To their employers, we were able to make the argument through the Future of Giving report that by participating in the MAP Fellowship, it would actually retain your employees longer because they would feel like they were contributing to something bigger than themselves. It would give them a nonprofit experience where they could be a real change maker. I also like to think, Carrie mentioned that brand is a benefactor. We look at, the Bob Edgars of, the CEO of Walt Disney and these kind of CEOs in the private sector that are put on pedestals, as they should be for their amazing work. And Carrie asks, why aren't nonprofit executives the same way? Why don't we look at the CEO of the World Wildlife Foundation? Why are they not a household name? The MAP Fellowship, I like to think, also elevated through media opportunities, network connections, etc., all of the participants involved, including that of the nonprofit executives. Precision funding. I think this is so important. And there's really 2 key takeaways for me from the report that were integrated into the MAP Fellowship, the Morgridge Acceleration Program Fellowship. One was the need for data. So first, what does success look like, and how can we rethink how we measure and evaluate this program, but not only measure and evaluate it, but be nimble enough that we could act like a startup, just like Carrie mentioned, and pivot and say, okay, if this isn't working in the program, and we know this through data, quantitative and qualitative, and we're measuring it, how can we nip it in the butt and mitigate it immediately? We did that constantly throughout the program. I let people know that we were flying, this was the first time we'd ever done something like this. This was an exciting pilot, and we wanted it to be the best that it could possibly be. Honesty, feedback, measurement, and evaluation had to be central. And that for me, my promise was that I would pivot alongside them and help make those changes a reality. So what was the result? Here, those were the 5 pillars of, or the 5 cultural shifts in giving, and how we were able to integrate them into a program that we built from scratch at the foundation. Well, I mentioned some of them earlier. Fellows were really highlighted and invigorated by this work. We know that through data. We also know that through some tangential things like one of the fellows receiving funding to continue their work, being invited onto boards, getting job opportunities from this experience. But I'm excited to say, and this isn't 100% public yet, we've had other foundations approach us and say, we actually want to sponsor MAP fellows. How can we duplicate and grow and scale this model so that we can fund young people to come into organizations, nonprofit organizations that we invest in, and help innovate them? All of the case studies, by the way, that I mentioned that the fellows wrote, they're all open sourced. So they're on the Morgridge Family Foundation website. I'm happy to share that link. And in 2021, we're going to be scaling and diversifying the program greatly. We're increasing the size of the fellowship by 100%. And we're also going to be looking at how the Morgridge Acceleration Program Fellowship isn't only a fellowship, but how can the Morgridge Acceleration Program be a fellowship, a social innovation incubator? How can we build a true ecosystem of social impact that feeds itself in a sustainable and meaningful way? So when Carrie called me and said, we have a problem, I want to find a way that we can continue to contribute human resources to nonprofit organizations. I know that writing a check for a 1-year position is not sustainable, but what could be? She asked me the same question at the end that she did to you at the end of her TED Talk. Here's the future of giving. Now what will you do? That's what I did, at least in the immediate. It's something that I think about as well in my day-to-day work. But I'll leave you with that same question. What will you do with the future of giving? How will you integrate it and infuse it into programs and investments that you'll make every day? So thank you so much. That's just a little bit about me. I'm happy to answer any questions, be more specific about anything that I mentioned. I'm happy to put lots of links in the chat about the fellowship program, and you can see the direct connection that it has to the future of giving. Again, thank you so much for having me. Oh, that was my 15-minute timer. I killed it. Wow. Thank you so much. And it's just a pleasure to be here and to chat with so many inspiring folks.
Thank you, Tony. We do have some questions for you already.
Wonderful.
We've got one. Can you give some examples on how to get the younger generations excited and wanting to engage in nonprofits if they don't know what area or interest they have or where they should start?
How to get young people interested in nonprofit work. I think if the Future of Giving report tells us anything, it's that we know that young people are interested in the work of nonprofits. I remember being in high school and I would hear the word nonprofit and I didn't know what that meant, a 501c3 organization. I think that I think sometimes it's making the connection that nonprofit, and I know this sounds so elementary, but it's making the connection that nonprofit organizations are social impact organizations. When you think about the folks who are out in the world, like what is the thing that you care about? If it's animal conservation, nonprofits are the good folks who are actually out there executing that work. I think it starts with a little bit of education with what nonprofit can almost sound jargony to young people. I think there are sexier words out there now, and we have to somehow educate and inspire them to bridge that gap.
Absolutely. And starting where they are, right? Having some of those organizations going into the schools, or at least now going virtually into those middle schools and elementary schools and high schools to introduce themselves to students.
Absolutely. And then, Carrie touched on this as well, but I really believe that we're going to see a total integration of the social and private sector. And I can give you some examples. I mean, shoes, as you all know, you buy a pair, you give a pair. I think that's going to become the new industry standard. I think that corporate social responsibility is going to die out, quite frankly. This idea that like when I buy Coca-Cola, 25, a nickel of every Coca-Cola bottle I buy goes to diabetes research. I think the upcoming generation is going to call, pardon my language, BS on that and say, just because I'm drinking Coke doesn't mean that, and you're giving money to diabetes, like I'm not like at less of a risk for diabetes, right? Like there's not that direct link. Instead, I think what's going to happen is Coca-Cola is going to say, you know what? Your bottle is now 100% eco-friendly and can be composted. Or we're going to see direct, we're going to see Capital One come out with a card that is not 1% back for groceries and 2% back for gas, but is 2% back for gas and 1% donated to the 501c3 of your choice every single time every time you spend. We're going to see that integration happen through the advent of brand as a benefactor.
Absolutely. Ready for another one?
Absolutely. Hit me.
All right. So someone wants you to put the link for the Fellows program in the chat so that they can get some more information. And while you're doing that, think about how nonprofits can, so she wants you to elaborate a little bit more on how nonprofits can get youth to contribute and become involved with their specific nonprofit. We talked about going to the schools and starting where the students are and where the youth are. What are some other ways, Tony, that they can reach out?
I would look at building out a youth component to whatever it is you do, an empowerment, whether it's a junior board, whether it's looking for a local champion, really understand your cause. I think that the mistake that I've seen happen before and that I've made is to say that I want to reach a certain audience, but not actually have a certain audience member at the table having that conversation. I think it's identifying as someone who could be either a champion or has that initiative to come to the table and say to them, how can we galvanize? We all want the same thing, which is pick your cause. Animal conservation. Again. We all want to conserve, the wildlife of Northwest Florida. I saw in an article that you were, that was published, that you had collected $500 to save, a specific kind of bird in this region. We would love to, have you help us develop a strategy where we can have more people do just that. I think that it's a little bit of research of identifying who that champion is, whether that's also going to high schools or just, reading the newspaper and doing some Googling, and then bringing that audience to the table and having them help you meet other people where they're at.
Right. It's the basic marketing 101 strategy, right? Yeah. You have to bring in your target audience to ask them what they want.
Call it the very complex smart marketing strategy.
Okay. It's a very complex smart marketing strategy.
It's listening to your audience. It's marketing.
Exactly. Yeah. You want to know what they want and you want to know how they'll get involved. Ask them.
Right. Exactly.
What they want and how they'll get involved.
And I think that's so exciting for a young person to get to go to an organization that's working on something meaningful, especially as they're thinking about college and what they want to do or what they want to do after high school, to have that leadership opportunity.
Absolutely. Here's another one. What suggestions do you have for nonprofits that want to tap more into working with businesses and brands? So like the Toms.
Yep.
Buy one, get one, give one.
I think it's nuanced. For me, it's nuanced depending on the brand or on the nonprofit itself. And whether and where your geography is, if you're national, if you're local, etc. If I was, I would love to know a little bit more of who asked that question and what their nonprofit is, but just to, if I was, I would really guerrilla market it. I mean, and you have to do a little bit of that work yourself, right? Like if you're a nonprofit you're doing them a favor. You're doing, as a nonprofit, you're doing that business a favor. So if what you do is go out into the water and collect plastic, I would go to a local liquor store, or assuming you're local, a local liquor store, start small and say, hey, we can do you a favor. We know you have a problem where folks, like, you need a unique value proposition, right, with all the other liquor stores in town. what if we were to partner and you were to say 1 penny out of every, or whatever the model is, goes to our organization, and that you know that waste is an issue that you face as a result of your industry and of your business. Let us help you mitigate that. And let's figure out how we can integrate that into the user experience, because we know that that's what the future of giving is going to entail.
Absolutely. And so again, identifying and defining clearly what your organization does, and then looking to see what local or national businesses can benefit from what you do, and,
Yeah,
and giving that to them.
absolutely. And I think local is definitely going to be, or regional is going to be easier than national. But I also believe that you have to approach it mentally as you are doing them a favor, right? Like, they have a problem and you are the solution. The problem is that their industry has waste, is not environmentally friendly, is selling tobacco, whatever their problem is. Position yourself as the solution. And you can even start conversations like that, right? Like, tell us about, from a social impact or a CSR standpoint, like what problems do you face? And then once you hear their problem, position yourself as the solution.
Absolutely. Those are great. What change in thinking needs to take place for local nonprofits in this area to be able to come to the table and do something similar to the Fellows program that you guys established?
I think the fellowship program was not born because we decided that we wanted to have a fellowship program. The fellowship program was born because we had a problem that we were trying to solve. So I think that when it comes to integrating these 5 cultural shifts, don't think about it, or I would recommend not thinking about it as, how can we build something that, like, the problem that you should be trying to solve is, how can we build something that incorporates all this? It should instead be, what's the problem that we're currently trying to solve, and how can we solve for it, leveraging the understanding of these 5 cultural shifts? So I think that's the mentality that I would encourage local nonprofits to have. And to be honest, you could also back into it. If you have a current project or a current portfolio or current whatever it is that you're trying to solve, or a problem that you're trying to solve with embedded in an established organization, use these as a roadmap or as a guiding, your North Star, or as a guiding force. I would encourage not to build programs for the sake of building programs. I would build programs and ideas based off of problems that you're trying to solve, and then strategically integrate these 5 cultural shifts, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. And I would want to flip that and say, in the meeting today, in the roundtable, we also have some for-profit, we have some businesses who are in fact struggling with, how do we make a social difference? How do we make an impact societally, whether that's environment or people, whatever it may be? What do we say to them? How do we encourage them to get started? How do we help them to identify their niche area and organizations to partner with?
Yeah, so I think there's 2 things there. The first is making it clear to for-profit organizations that, and this is proven through business revenue, right? Like, brands that are more social, that have a social impact integration strategy, are more successful. Folks feel more comfortable buying their brands. So once you can get over the hurdle of, like, if you do not have a social impact strategy embedded in what you do, you gotta fix that, or be open to thinking about, how that integration can be possible. Then, if I was a private organization and I was like, okay, where should I start? If you're on this call, I think Northwest Florida Impact 100 is a wonderful place to start. I mean, you guys know you have your ear to the ground for tons of nonprofits across all different kinds of sectors. So if you're looking for that match to be made, I would totally turn to your local Impact 100 chapter. I also think United Ways tend to be a great kind of aggregate, ear to the ground nonprofit convener as well. So I would say number 1 is understanding that there really isn't a choice, and the future of giving speaks to this. I know the full report was just shared with everyone. I highly take, I would say, look at brand as a benefactor. It lays out a pretty compelling argument. And then I would say, find, if you will, nonprofit conglomerates or nonprofit conveners in your area, and they've already done the work. Impact 100 Northwest Florida knows who the best Northwest Florida nonprofits are across a variety of sectors. So leverage their understanding. It's a win-win-win-win.
Absolutely. And make sure, I would add, make sure that that for-profit business is doing it because they really believe in that cause.
Yes.
And in that issue, not just to be able to promote it, because that doesn't last. You and I both know that about organizational culture, right? It doesn't. If it's just artifacts, if it's just at the top and slogans, and it doesn't last. It's got to permeate throughout the organization.
Yep, you're absolutely right. And I also think there's an opportunity not just for something financial, right? Like if it's a small organization, it doesn't necessarily just need to be, I don't know why I keep going to the liquor store. You can, clearly what's on my mind. But, it's not just liquor store, give us $1 or give us, a nickel for every, dollar that's spent on plastic goods. It could be, hey, you know what? Every month we have an organization where all of your employees can volunteer to help clean up rivers that have been polluted with liquor bottles, right? Like there are lots of different ways to both look at it from a financial component, from an employee engagement program. We also know that by engaging your employees in community service, it makes them feel more empowered and more likely to stay with an organization.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Here's another one. Let's see. I just saw it. Where do you see faith-based nonprofits and churches fitting into the plan, or mosques or temples or any other religious faith-based organization? And the writer says that may be two different questions. So where do you see faith-based or nonprofits affiliated with places of worship fitting into this model of giving?
So I am not I'll just be transparent that faith-based organizations are not within my portfolio at Morgridge, and I don't have a ton of experience in the strategy of, allowing them to be successful. But that being said, I do have a few ideas. We know that from this report, at least, that one of the cultural shifts is diminishing societal trust. And under diminishing societal trust, and as Carrie mentioned, and Carrie is she wouldn't mind me saying this, as a religious person, I have a connection to religion as well. We know that the younger generations are less trusting of, widely speaking, of religious organizations and institutions at large. So that being said, I think the opportunity, at least with the future of giving, is actually, if the diminishing societal trust is the third cultural shift, what I would do, I think, is look at the other four and say, if we know that the diminishing societal trust for big institutions, government, religion among them, how can we look at youth rising, existential risk to humanity, brand as a benefactor, and precision funding to help get ahead of what could be a decline in participation? For example, youth rising, look at how Generation Z is acting, and maybe you embody some of their values in your church. Existential risk to humanity calls for collective communities who can rally together around things like COVID and climate change. And a church has a built-in community. So maybe that's a right place to lean into that area. I think that it's really looking at, in a way of integrating these findings, I would see the diminishing societal trust as an opportunity to really lean into the four other cultural shifts.
Absolutely. And again, asking the youth what they're interested in, asking them to help solve problems and issues that you've identified, right?
I think a top-down approach can be a very dangerous thing, meaning an organization saying, here's what we're doing, get on board. I think if this says anything, it's a really we need to empower the folks that we want action from. And a way to empower them, Joyce, to your point, is really to bring them to the table and say, and use it strategically, right? Be like we know, use this report. Say if you're talking to a bunch of people from Gen Z, understand their habits from the report prior to going into the meeting. And instead of saying, so are you guys into social impact integration? Saying, as a church, we want to, we're really interested, or whatever the faith place may be. As an organization, we want to make sure that we are like, our vision statement is to be the most socially impactful organization in our community. What do you guys think about that? What excites you, right? So like already coming to them with that information rather than starting like 2 levels up and asking, are you interested? We know they're interested. Let's get them at the table, empowered to actually do something about it.
Absolutely. Tony, thank you. This has been fabulous. I hope that everyone has gotten 2 or 3 things that they can take away. We appreciate you. We appreciate the time.
This is so my pleasure. I am the biggest cheerleader for Impact 100 in Northwest Florida. I, again, thank you for all that everyone on this call does every day and every year to make the world a better place. I'm happy to leave my email in the chat as well. And if folks have any follow-up questions or want to learn more, I'm always happy to be, I'm just writing this now, tony.cohn@thinkmff.org. Oh, I just sent that directly to Janice's song. So tony.cohn@thinkmff.org. But this is my pleasure. I mean, I love getting to meet with inspiring people and play a small part in helping you be successful and whatever that means. So really, thank you, Joyce.
Thank you. We are so glad that each of you were able to be here today. Carrie asked, what are you going to do? And Tony challenged us to work together and to work in ways that we may not have worked in the past. We encourage you to read the report, share the videos. You can go to the Impact100 website to learn about the organization, become involved with our mission, find out about local nonprofits and what some of their needs are by looking at our wish lists or reaching out to our grant chair, Marty Broderick. We also encourage you, if you are a nonprofit, to make plans now to attend our grant workshop on the 15th of April. The women of Impact 100 are not wealthy women. We are generous women. Generous women like the organizers of this roundtable, and I'd like for you to join me in thanking them. Marty Broderick, Nancy Francis, Leanne Caravello, Valerie Bogar, and Valerie Burrell. Together, all of us want to thank you for being here. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and go make an impact. Thank you.